A threatening call, an anonymous confession letter, revenge, a motive you wouldn't guess, and a deadly wedding gift. This case comes out of India. I have not heard many people talk about it, so we are going to be diving deep into what in the world happened, how it came to this, and why two newlyweds were attacked after their wedding. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. If you enjoy these videos, I post every single Sunday and would love to have you back here again. And if you want to be notified personally by me every time I upload a video, you can sign up for the Genuine Gem newsletter down below. I would love to have you to make sure that you never miss an upload. But first, a quick mention for our sponsor, Trade. With many of us switching to iced coffee in the warmer season, Trade is perfect for those of us who want to make a cold brew at home without spending $8 a cup each time when we go out. With Trade, it's sent straight to your door, and all you have to do is scoop the coffee, fill the water, chill overnight, and it's ready for you in the morning. You get fancy cafe coffee without the expensive price tag, which is so important to me. Trade is teamed up with 15 expert roasters to source the best beans from across the U.S., and has this exclusive cold brew collection with expertly curated equipment that's so easy to use. My boyfriend's been obsessed with prepping the cold brew at night to take it to work with him in the morning, and you're not sacrificing taste either. So Trade saves you time, it saves you money, and you don't have to sacrifice the taste. For a limited time, Trade is actually giving away a free Harry-O cold brewer when you sign up for a cold brew subscription with drinktrade.com/Brooke. That's drinktrade.com/Brooke to get your free cold brewer with select cold brewer subscriptions. That's drinktrade.com/Brooke. Now let's get back to the story. So on February 23rd of 2018, the police were called to a home in Brahmanpura, Patnagarh, India. And this home belonged to the Sahu family. Now, when the inspector arrived to this home, he would find a home filled with smoke. An explosion had scattered the household articles everywhere, and people were injured. Newlyweds were inside, and that was 26-year-old Soumya Sahu, as well as 22-year-old Reema Sahu, as well as the groom's grandmother. Now, I've seen grandmother as well as great aunt, but the most I heard was that she was the grandmother. So this was 85-year-old Jimamani, who was also at the scene. Now, the home was owned by the groom's parents, who were actually Rabindra, who was a lecturer in zoology at a local college, and his wife, the groom's mother, Sanjukta, who was a principal at another college. Now, the newlyweds' parents had moved into this home 2 years prior, and then the newlyweds moved in after their marriage. So Soumya and Reema had been there for about 4 days at this point. But that day, the neighbors heard an explosion and came rushing over to help. All 3 people inside the home were rushed to the district headquarters hospital. Unfortunately, on the route, the grandmother, Jimamaya, was declared dead. She had suffered burns to 90% of her body, and the newlywed couple were then transferred to the VSS Medical College and Hospital, and this is where the groom, Soumya, would be declared dead as well. Now, the bride, Reema, she survived, but with serious injuries to about 40% of her body on her face, chest, abdomen, and both of her upper arms. It was documented that her injuries smelled of gunpowder. It was believed that if the injuries had actually affected her vital organs, it would have caused her death as well. She was kept in a burn unit in order to recover. Now, Soumya and Reema were married just 5 days prior to this. They had met through family introductions, and they had been engaged for a little more than a year. Reema had actually been adopted by her biological father's brother because he wanted a daughter and only had sons at this point, and his brother had 3 daughters, so Reema was sent to his care. Reema was said to be a cheerful, pretty girl who went to college. She knew the Oriya language, and that's what she got a degree in. You know, the groom, Soumya, was a software engineer who worked with Japanese electronics after studying computer science. These two had met a few times before their marriage in the presence of their families, and they officially married on the 18th, but had their reception on the 20th. On the 23rd, the day of the explosion, the groom's parents were actually out of the home, and so it was just the newlyweds and the grandmother. They were planning to grill eggplant and have lentil soup for lunch. Now, this was known due to the fact that Reema survived, but at 12:45 in the afternoon, a delivery boy from the Sky King Courier arrived at the home. The delivery man would show up with this package addressed to Soumya, and it was stated that it was sent by S.K. Sharma with an address from Raipur, which is about 4 hours away. The groom didn't know someone by this name, nor anyone in that area. He reportedly told his wife it appeared to be a wedding gift for the couple, and they thought nothing of it because they had been getting many gifts sent to them to congratulate their marriage. So Soumya opened the parcel in the kitchen with his wife and his grandmother watching over him to see what was inside. When he removed the outer cover, there was another packet inside, and there was also a white thread that was projected to the outside. And without thinking, he pulled the thread, and a flash of light blinded them. An explosion occurred big enough to shake the entire house, and the kitchen erupted. They were all knocked off of their feet, collapsing onto the tile floor while bleeding. Now there was only one survivor who had no idea what would have caused anyone to want to do this to them. Autopsies of Soumya and Jimamani revealed that the cause of death was due to hemorrhage and shock due to the blast injuries. Reema would say that they were all on the floor waiting for help. The grandmother was on fire. She heard her husband groaning, "Save me, I think I am dying," before losing consciousness. She remembered that there were burns stinging her face and her arms. She was struggling to breathe due to the smoke. When the neighbors arrived, they were asking whether the cooking gas cylinder had exploded. That's what they believed that this was from, but she was worried about crawling over to the phone to try to call her husband's mother, who owned the home. However, she passed out before that call went through. But now Reema's father stated that they were all very simple people living simple lives. They had no enemies. They didn't suspect anybody because they didn't know anybody who would have done this. But in the hospital, 3 weeks later was when Reema would find out that her husband did not make it. Her family had kept it from her in order for her to heal, but she had discovered a newspaper saying that he had been killed in the blast. She began yelling at her family that they lied to her. She broke down sobbing, and they actually recorded this moment and posted it to the media, hoping that this would help the government to step up the investigation and arrest the culprit soon. Now, the local police had begun investigating this, but it was quickly taken over by the Odisha Crime Branch, as they believed this investigation would require many more resources. So they showed up to the home, and they found that the impact was so severe, it had cracked the walls, it had shattered the door and window panes, household articles were damaged, the plaster was ripped off the ceiling, and the water purifier was blown apart. There was also a window that had flung off into a nearby field. Now, surveillance footage from one of the neighbors showed the blast, and then the neighbors rushing over, and then them carrying out 3 of the wounded individuals in bed sheets to the ambulance. Now, a scientific team and the bomb disposal team arrived to the crime scene to collect explosion materials for evidence. They also seized paperwork from the Sky King courier who had delivered that package. They were able to find that the package had come from DTDC Courier in Raipur around February 15th, 8 days prior to the explosion. The receptionist there was asked about the person sending the parcel, and she said that this was a man who told her that this package contained sweets. Ultimately, he was being asked too many questions, and he took the package and he left, and he allegedly was believed to go to Sky King Courier. And the owner of this courier was telling investigators that the sender's name was actually S.K. Sinha, not S.K. Sharma, as they thought the package said. From there, the package had been tracked on 3 buses, passing 4 pairs of hands, and it had actually arrived in town on the 20th, and it was meant to be delivered that day. However, the delivery driver had seen this big marriage reception happening and decided to wait to deliver it later. So it officially arrived at the Sahu home on the 23rd. Of course, when the explosion occurred. The owner of this Sky King courier said that there was an auto rickshaw outside of the office when this man came in to deliver it. Now, investigators did not know if this man was the one who created the bomb, if he knew what he had. They were working to identify this man, but the name and the address they found were false, and unfortunately, there was no CCTV cameras in the office, and the parcel wasn't scanned, so they didn't actually know who it was coming from. Weeks went by, there was no clear suspects, and after the blast, survivor Reema made an emotional plea to the chief minister seeking justice. She wanted stringent action taken against those who were involved. There was no suspects, and she didn't even have anyone who could be a suspect. She was residing with her parents at first after getting out of the hospital, and then she moved in with her in-laws. She told the media, "I have been staying with my in-laws for the last 11 days and recovering. My health is also improving except for the loss of hearing in one of my ears. My in-laws and I are providing strength to each other. Now my in-laws are taking care of me, and I will also look after them in the future." When asked if she had any idea the reason behind the blast, Reema said, "I had never thought that there could be such a trivial issue behind the whole incident. I demand that the accused should be hanged till death." But more than 100 people had been questioned, along with family and friends of the newlyweds. This was believed to be a wedding gift after all, from someone that they knew and someone who knew that they recently got married. Investigators believed that this was a meticulously planned and executed crime. They believed that this was the work of a fairly knowledgeable person well-versed on the arts of bomb making. Forensic experts found it to be wrapped in jute thread meant to detonate upon opening. By March 2018, with little evidence and 2 murders unsolved, the sole survivor came forward again. She had spent a month in the hospital recovering, and she told the police that back in March of 2017, so a year prior, her then boyfriend, now husband, had received an anonymous call. Soumya was out of town at the time, and he was on the phone with his girlfriend, and that's when he said another call was coming in. So he put her on hold, and he would tell her later on that he had received a threatening call. There was a man on the other line telling him not to get married. This was just before he proposed, just before their engagement. And though Groom's father also corroborated this story, saying that his son had told him this as well, that the caller spoke in the coastal Odia language and threatened that the groom would face dire consequences if he went ahead to marry Reema. Soumya didn't tell anyone at first, and then he slowly let people in, but there were no further calls made. But investigators wanted to work this lead, one of the first that they had gotten. There was speculation around this time that they had a suspect in custody that they were getting ready to do a polygraph test on regarding this call, but not much was said. All investigators said was that they were focusing on that trip that Soumya had made when he was out of town and when he received that phone call. Investigators then got a lead on that threatening phone call. Witnesses had claimed that this was made by a young man about Reema's age who allegedly knew Reema. In fact, he was believed to be her ex. He blamed Reema for allegedly ditching him and getting engaged to a richer boy. Investigators were able to track him down and found him to be the scorned lover, but not a killer. They believed he had made that threatening phone call, but it was nothing more than that. The problem was, if this wasn't a suspect, they didn't have any. They were also examining his social media and his phone records. Investigators found that it was quite strange with Soumya's social media because he actually deleted his Facebook profile weeks before his marriage before creating a new one. It was unknown why, but there were also parts of Reema's past that investigators thought could be part of this as well. When she was back in school, a classmate had actually been harassing her to the point that her parents had to lodge a complaint with the principal. However, this was about 6 years prior, and it was not believed that that harassment was still occurring. But 2 months after the explosion, an arrest was made on April 24th. Investigators had received a letter in connection to this case to the police department, and this letter mentioned that the package was sent in the name of S.K. Sinha, not S.K. Sharma, as the survivor had stated. Now, this would have only been known by the sender of the package. This writer also said that there were 3 people involved in this project, and the motive was Soumya's betrayal that led to many people losing their lives and money. The writer was also asking the police not to harass innocent people during interrogation, insinuating that anyone that they had already interrogated was not involved. Senior Officer Arun Botra then went to look at the package and looked at the label. It did appear as though this could have been Senna or Sharma. So the senior officer believed that the person writing this letter could have also made the bomb. Forensic scientists did testing on the letter and the envelope, finding faint fingerprints which did not provide a match to anyone in the system. They also tried to extract a genetic profile from the saliva on the envelope but failed to find any. He said, "It's clear that the sender knew more about the crime than we did. By writing that it was being sent by a messenger, he wanted to tell us that the crime was not the work of a local man. He wanted to tell us that the plot was executed by 3 people. He wanted to be taken seriously, so he was kind of blowing his fake cover by pointing out a mistake we had made." Because investigators had actually been able to get several clues from this letter, including the language and the font size and the spacing that indicated that it was written by someone with command over English. Of course, they did not speak English for the most part in India, and so this was something that was quite unique and believed to be quite an intelligent thing to do. So when those close to the victims were shown this letter, one relative actually recognized the writing style immediately. This was Soumya Sahu, the groom's mother. Instantly, she realized she had seen this phraseology in the letter before. This was someone she knew. In fact, this was someone she worked with. You see, since Sanjuta was the principal of a college, she knew that this writing belonged to the English professor who worked there as well, or so she thought. Of course, this would not be enough evidence to convict him. However, this led investigators to this man's home. A search was conducted and 9 envelopes similar to the envelope sent to the police was found inside, as well as a laptop, a pen drive, and other documents. A receipt from the Sky King Courier in Raipur was then found. On the pen drive, investigators recovered a deleted file that matched documents that contained the anonymous letter. It had been typed on his personal laptop and printed at the local shop. There was also residue of crackers used to prepare the parcel, which were seized from the dustbin in front of his home. Diaries were also found partially burned that revealed his mindset at the time and his hatred towards the victim's mom. 49-year-old Punji Lal Meher was taken into custody, though when he was questioned, he would state that he was forced to deliver this package under threat. Police were baffled when Meher told them that he was simply out on an evening walk when a man approached him and handed him a letter telling him that he needed to deliver it to the police, and if he didn't, the man would harm him. But Sanjuta is certain that he had written that letter, claiming that he would often use the phrase completing the project in everyday life. The author of the letter had called this tragedy a project as well. The prime suspect was found to have attended both the wedding and the funeral of the victim. Then he would admit to what he had done, even volunteering to do a demo of how he had created it. In part of his confession, Meher said, "I was consumed by rage and hatred. I could not swallow the humiliation." In his charge sheet, the crime Meher was accused of was said to be an act of revenge. Meher had studied tutorials on the internet and began to acquire chemicals and fireworks. He would extract powder from the fireworks, and he made several test bombs for creating this wedding gift placed in a cardboard box wrapped in gift wrapping. He then admitted to traveling from his home in Raipur to send the package. He left his phone at home so that couldn't be traced and took the train but did not buy a ticket to avoid detection. He had already looked up what courier services were in basement-like areas with no CCTVs. So he handed the package to another man to give to the Sky King courier. He then took the train back home, and while awaiting the package's arrival, he attended the victim's wedding. He then attended the funerals of the victims that he had killed, and he decided to send a letter to the police to derail the whole investigation. But investigators claim that because they had so little evidence prior to this, the letter actually gave them more information needed to identify him. All evidence was circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses until this letter. But why did this colleague of the victim's mother want revenge, and why did he choose to do it in this way? Many believe that it had something to do with love or an affair, but that actually had nothing to do with it. It was found that Meher had been plotting a revenge killing for months after the victim's mother, Sangdutta, had been promoted to principal at the college where they worked. Meher was said to feel slighted because she was actually replacing him. That's right, this killer had once been the principal of this college. When he was replaced, he was reportedly unwilling to relinquish his post, and he harbored resentment over the transition. He had been principal since 2009, and when Sangdutta joined the college in 2014 as a history professor, she was already 13 years his senior, and the college decided to bump her up instead. Now, he was said to continually harass her, to propagate scandals against her. He became angry, obsessive, and hostile towards her. Staff members would corroborate this story, and investigators believe that he wanted to eliminate the whole family with this blast. He would admit that he wanted to make Sangdutta endure the pain of losing her son throughout the rest of her life. Survivor Reema did an interview saying that she did not get justice until now with this arrest, but she didn't know at this time how long this process would actually take. In March of 2019, it was stated that he should not be released on bail because he was a very cunning and powerful guy and is likely to tamper with the evidence. He had actually already tried to escape from the jail with the help of the other prisoners by attacking the jail staff. That was back in January of 2019, but thankfully he was caught. So now at his bail hearing, the judge S.K. Shu said, "Jealousy towards the colleague for losing principalship of the college seems to have spread tentacles of cancerous cells in the revengeful mind of the loser for painstaking planning and executing the infamous case of the Parcel tragedy. When jealousy takes over the human mind completely, it creates a feeling of neurotic insecurity, being engrossed by the incurable disease of covetousness and possessed with a mad devil and a dull spirit. A jealous person gets stuck with his dark and starless nights and tries to eclipse the sun of his rival in an illegal way, stooping to the lowest level. Lack of ability of a volcanic-minded person to decide what is right and what is wrong and how to act or to be or not to be situation not only becomes troublesome to others but also creates torment to himself. Winning a jealousy game against an opponent is no victory, but an unending, painful tragedy." Needless to say, he was not given bail, but he was refusing to eat anything living off of glucose water. He was given a medical check daily to make sure he was still alive, and he was allegedly doing this due to being on strike because he claimed that they transferred him to this new prison legally. But it was claimed that he was transferred because the guards at his previous jail were attempting to kill him. That's also the one he tried to escape from. But in 2020, Panjilal was allowed a one-day bail to attend the funeral of his mother. And then in 2021, Reema was still awaiting justice for her murdered husband. She was saying that she remembers him every single day. However, Meher still hadn't been sentenced 7 years later in February of 2025. He was charged with murder, attempted murder, and use of explosives. In April of 2025, the prosecution would present 62 witnesses, 100 pieces of evidence, and 51 material objects in court. However, the defense argued that he had been framed and they had 3 witnesses, including the accused, as well as 8 pieces of evidence in document form. They claimed that the prosecution did not properly investigate and that they could prove he was innocent. The prosecution had said that this was a heinous crime, but they chose not to classify it as a rarest of rare, which could result in the death penalty. They said that they wanted to, but the court would not allow it because they claim that all heinous crime cases could not be treated like that. The Supreme Court then urged the court to make a swift resolution in this case because it had already taken 7 years to get justice. So the senior officer, Arun Botra, said that this was one of the most difficult cases they had ever had. They had even created a team of officers to work specifically on this case. And he said for much of it, they had no evidence at all. The parcel itself had been blown to bits. And he said that many believed that this was a lover that wanted revenge on the newlyweds. But then the letter came and said that the groom was the target. It was due to betrayal, due to his cheating life, like he deserved it. However, we now know that neither of those are true, and the killer was just trying to throw off investigators, which didn't work for long. On May 28, 2025, Punji Lal Meher was sentenced to life with a fine of $5,000, which is about $585. The judge said every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. He was hoping for rehabilitation, but he was sent to Ward 11 in jail as inmate number 5882. The groom's father told reporters, "We have suffered an irreparable loss. We were hoping for capital punishment in the crime and considering its rarest of rare nature, but the court sentenced life imprisonment. We express our gratitude to the court." The groom's mother said she was satisfied, but she could not get back what was lost. Survivor Reema was said to have lived with her in-laws for 6 years after the explosion and the death of her husband, but she is now remarried and living in another country. Her father-in-law actually helped her with her new marriage, her new wedding, and wanted to give her the rest of her life away from these traumatic memories. He said he wanted her to lead life afresh. They still have contact with her, and they said that they would report back to her on this great news. So what in the world do you think of this case? Anytime that I research a true crime case from India, I am baffled by the just insanity that is happening, the amount of just strange elements that are thrown in there. I mean, it truly is baffling. I'll link any others that I've done down below, but what do you think about this threatening call that was made a year before their murders? Do you think that had anything to do with it? That seems like a completely separate thing. Was this call from somebody who knew what this man was planning to do at the wedding? And so he was warning Soumya not to get married because he knew what was going to happen with the wedding gift? Or was that just someone who, used to love Reema in the past, maybe an ex, maybe, and that really had nothing to do with this case? It's just so sad to me that this man was invited to their wedding and attended, all while knowing that his deadly wedding gift was en route to their home. It also baffles me a little bit that he arranged for it to arrive the day of the wedding where he attended. And if they would have opened that present, he could have also been in the blast zone. Although you could say that he wouldn't have been close enough because obviously he would have known what his package looked like and he could have fled at that point. But that's just strange to me. All around, this case appears to not be very well thought out, but then it very much was, because who thinks to put something like that in a wedding gift, and who thinks that anything horrible is going to be found inside? You are opening gifts and you're celebrating and you think that everyone around you is happy for you, and then this happens, and 5 days after marriage, these newlyweds were split apart forever. And the groom and the poor grandmother were killed. Do you think that if this package was delivered on the wedding day, that it would have had many more casualties? Was that an instance of this delivery driver being some sort of angel without knowing it, and his one choice to not deliver a package because there was this big celebration saved the lives of many? That is a positive in this tragic story, this unnecessary murder. A terrifying thought that a package delivered by a mailman, one that you feel like you can trust, is something that could harm you so severely it ends your life. And not just on accident, but because this was planned. This was calculated. All due to the fact that your mother got a job and her coworker wasn't happy about it. What do you think that he was planning to kill the whole family? Was that his ultimate goal, do you believe? Or do you think that he was just going after the son? You know, I couldn't get word for word his confession, especially with the language barrier. It was hard to find tons of information. But from what I have caught, he had admitted to doing it and basically just wanted to cause her suffering all around. I don't know if he necessarily cared who all it hurt. He just wanted to hurt someone. I just very much appreciate you listening. Don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye. I'm right here. You okay? What's going on? I'm just filming. Yeah, just filming.